Okay, all right. Welcome, everybody. I'm super excited to welcome you. My name is Masha Merkulova. I'm the Chief Zionist Officer of Club Z. And what is Club Z? Club Z is a Zionist youth movement. And what we're doing is we are raising the new American Jew. What does that mean? It means we're raising teens who are knowledgeable about history, context, Jewish identity, and peoplehood. That's number one. Number two, they're confident. They know who they are, and they are able to go into the world and defend themselves and defend the Jewish people. And number three, they have a tribe. They have a community that is supporting them and that will always have their back. So that's what we do. I would like to make a quick announcement that our dreams have come true, and we are piloting this summer a summer camp Club Z. We have partnered with a security organization that is run by veteran IDF soldiers, and they're going to be doing all sorts of fun Krav Maga, situational awareness, all sorts of physical things, and Club Z is going to be providing the Zionist education. So very excited. Please look out for an email. Okay, today's Purim. So I would like to start with just a quick quote by the Lubavitch's Rebbe. When asked what can be learned from the custom of wearing costumes on Purim, the Rebbe replied, on Purim, we see many people wearing costumes. One is a clown, one is an animal, and one is, you don't even know what he's dressed as. Do we get angry or upset with them? No, because we know it's just a costume. In life, we meet many people. One is impatient, one is angry, one is apathetic. This is not who they really are. This is just a costume. Deep in their heart, they are all warm people full of purity and beauty. We just need to interact with them with kindness and tenderness to remove the costume and reveal the pure soul inside each. And so it is with that intention that I would like to open this call. I would love to introduce my very good friend, Bar Yoshafat, who was our first speaker 11 years ago in Club Z and has remained a Club Z friend and my friend through all these years. Ran has worked in the legal department in Knesset. He has dedicated his life to Zionism and to Israel and to the Jewish people. And when Ran offered, it was actually quite funny. Richard Camp suggested that I bring Ran, and then Ran in the same day reached out, hey, let me speak to people. And then Mordechai Kedar, who was hanging out in Florida with me, said, you should do a call. I said, I think somebody's trying to tell me something. And so that is why we're doing this call. Ran, we're watching things unfold in Israel, as well as in the United States. On Sunday, almost 2.5 weeks ago, San Francisco Israeli community held a protest. In New York, there is a Jewish community that held a protest. And these are people who are, quote unquote, pro-Israel, who don't have any problem being Israel being a Jewish state, or so they say. But they're very, very concerned about the way the reforms are being proposed. Many of them have said that we're not against reforms, we're against these reforms. So the group of people that we have here are all people that are very much understand the issues. This is not a 101. This is a graduate level workshop, if you will. And a quick announcement, Ron will speak first for about 20, 30 minutes. Yes, Ron?
Right.
And then we'll open up to Q&A. What I would please ask you is to write your questions in the chat. and then I will call, I will either read your question and I will call on you. All right. All right. And Ron, please take it away.
All right, thank you very much. I have a few announcements before I begin. First of all, I'm very fortunate. I'm going to be in the New York retreat at early
Yes.
September. So if I'm open for other arrangements, if anyone wants to see me from other chapters while I'm there, let me know. A few things before I begin. I have an agenda. I work under Deputy Director of the Kohelet Policy Forum. According to foreign sources, we are the people behind the reform. It's not really true. We did not write up a position, but we are very pro legal reforms. But I am going to try to do my best to be as parv as I can. So I said it up front, I have an agenda, but I want you to understand the scenario. I'm also going to give you a lot of information, and because I cannot go over everything I say can be debated, because that's law. So you can say, wait, we didn't mention this or you didn't mention that, and that can give you a different frame. I'll try to be as fair as I can with the agenda that I have in mind. One thing that I would ask Masha is that if someone does not understand something I'm saying, not a question, like a clarification question, then they could address you privately in the chat, and then you'll tell me to stop, because I don't want people to not understand me, and then I'll move on. I have to be honest, I have a lot of empathy towards the people who are protesting. And I don't think there are very few of them who are anti-Israel, like tiny group that's anti-Israel. The vast majority are patriotic, pro-Israel, central left, some are even central right. But the vast majority are people who are from the central left, and they're patriotic, serve in the army, definitely like Israel, and they're very concerned. They're concerned about three things. I don't agree with them, but I want to be fair and represent them in a fair way. They think that in this atmosphere today, when you have a prime minister that is accused and in being investigated as under corruption right now, and you have one minister that is already convicted, and you have a lot of people in the coalition who are very anti-liberal values, that's the first thing that they don't like, the whole atmosphere. The second thing is the process. They're saying that it's being pushed too fast without a dialogue, and even if you want to have a reform, that's not the way. And lastly, and that's the most important, they're saying this is not just a bill proposition that I disagree with, this is changing the rules of the game, taking away my democracy in such a way that is making Israel to the minimum and not a liberal democracy, and then you can hurt minorities, women's rights, LGBTQ, and so on and so forth. So that's what they feel. I disagree with them, but I think that they are genuine in their concerns. What I'm going to try to do is I'm going to try to explain the situation. Also, one more thing. I often make the joke that the Israeli democracy is like Kenny from South Park. It keeps on dying and then it's resurrected the next chapter. But I have to be honest, I think that this time it's a lot more intense. I think that it's really people speaking from their hearts, saying, I'm not sure if I want to be a citizen in this country if this legal reform passes. Again, I think that they're wrong. I think that a lot of them don't really know what the details of the legal reform is, but they keep on hearing that basically you're going to have only one branch and it's not going to be a democracy and so on and so forth. And I acknowledge their pain. The reason why I acknowledge their pain is because this is how I have felt for the past 15 years. How the right-wingers have felt for the past at least 15 years, some for over 2 decades, because I feel that Israel is not really a democracy because my vote does not count, because I try to promote one policy and the judicial branch cancels that. Okay, so let's start with you're saying that this is not a one-on-one. I will try to say a few things just to be on the same page. Because we need to know how we got to where we are today. Israel does not have a constitution. We tried to create one. We were supposed to create a constitution when Israel was created. We were unable to. In the 1950s, they had a decision called the Harari decision. By the way, we did not have a constitution for many reasons, because of the Haredi parties, because of the Arab parties, because of the Mapai, many reasons. But we didn't write a constitution. So the parliament, the Israeli parliament, the Knesset, said, all right, let's try to do it chapter by chapter. So one day we will have a constitution. And the first thing, the easiest thing to write is the institutions of the state, the parliament, the government, the judges, how the state is created. That's the Harari decision from the 1950s. There are a few things that have changed throughout the years. So we legislated several basic laws. They're called basic laws. And in the 90s, I'm jumping forward in time, we had 3 cases that really changed the discourse in Israel. 2 basic laws that were passed. One is human dignity and freedom, and the other is freedom of occupation. These laws were passed, the first time they were passed again with a majority, but the first time they were passed 32 to 21. So if I take the opposition, the supporting, and those who are opposing it, it's not even half the people in the Israeli plenum. And that law basically is the human rights part of the Israeli constitution. The other law, freedom of occupation, had no opposing. It was 23 versus 0. And the 23 versus 0 said, if you want to change it, you have to have a majority of 61 and above. In case you don't know, the Israeli parliament has 120 members of parliament. So for me, that was a problem in the procedure. Just to be fair, both of these laws were passed again with a broad support. But when the laws were passed, it was with, I would argue, not in a full debate like we have today in Israel. 2 more things we need to take in mind that change the whole way the system works in Israel is the Pinchasi verdict and the Mizrahi verdict. Pinchasi verdict, in a nutshell, and again, I'm trying to be as fair as I can, I'm not giving you all the details. Yitzhak Rabin was supposed to fire someone from the government, one minister. He said he's not going to do it. His legal advisor said, I'm not sure I can protect your approach of not firing the minister in a court of law. It went to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court said the following: the question is not if the legal advisor has to represent the prime minister. The question is the prime minister allowed not to follow the orders of the legal advisor? And that is the approach today for legal advisors. The Mizrahi verdict had 2 questions. First of all, I'm giving my opinion here. I don't like the Mizrahi verdict because in my understanding of democracy and law, courts are supposed to solve disputes, not to ask theoretical questions. Theoretical questions you can ask in the academia, you can ask in the think tanks, but not in the court of law. I'm giving my 2 cents here, closing my 2 cents back to the describing reality. The Mizrahi verdict, they ask 2 questions. 1, does Israel have a constitution? And if Israel has a constitution, does that mean the Supreme Court can cancel regular laws? And the main approach is that Israel has somewhat of a constitution, so the Supreme Court can cancel laws. And now the argument is, okay, so what's the big deal? So you have a Supreme Court that says that they can cancel laws. The Supreme Court has only canceled 22 laws since of the judicial revolution.
Yeah.
The basic laws were passed again with a majority. Hold on, I'm going to ask you guys to be on
Well,
mute.
I mean, she's sensitive, fragile. So.
Masha, can you mute everyone? All right, thank you. The argument is that there were only 22 laws that were canceled by the Israeli Supreme Court, so it's not such a big deal. And for me, that is not the situation. And I'll try to explain. I'm gonna translate from Hebrew to English real fast. I'll hope to do it because it's not just the laws, it's also the government decisions. It's also just proposals of laws. It's also proposals of ministerial decisions and so on and so forth. So I'm going to read to you. I'm sorry, I'm not facing you. The army usage of neighbors, the way that the security fence is built, the anti-infiltrator law that was canceled 3 times, making it easier to get citizenship, the gas treaty that Israel had when they found gas in the Mediterranean Sea, rules of engagement, women's basketball broadcasting, army haircuts, law questions for the bar associations, How many people can be in Israel as foreign workers? Does Netanyahu have the ability to light a Mesuah on Independence Day? Yes or no? Should you add a women to the Turkle committee? Canceling people that are nominated for different positions in the government? Not allowing the Chok Tal to pass? Taking away citizenship from the people of Hamas in Eastern Jerusalem? The 2-year budget, the boycott law, taxation of the third apartment that you own, subsidizing ranches for monkeys. When should Lag BaOmer vacation begin? Is the apology of a chief rabbi for the IDF enough for him to continue in his role? Canceling an award because of a bad statement that someone made. Can Lieberman, as Minister of Defense, that was Minister of Interior Affairs at that time, should he be allowed or not be allowed to tell people if they can come or not come from Judea and Samaria into Israel proper? The awards that people are going to get for the Minister of Education. I can continue on and on and on and on. So the argument that I have, where sometimes people will disagree with me, is that it's not a small issue. It's the biggest issue right now that we have on the table. I will send the list I have it in Hebrew. I can translate this into English and pass it along. This is the tip of the iceberg. Okay, so I explained how we got this situation. Now I'm giving an argument. I'm not just describing, I'm giving also my opinion. I think the scenario is horrible. Yes, Masha.
I just want you to underscore the list that you read is what again? What is that list?
Places where the judicial branch interfered with the legislator or with the executive branch. Okay. Where I would say that is undemocratic. I'll give you one example that really upsets me. There was a soldier. His name was Moshe Tamam. He was kidnapped, tortured, and murdered by a terrorist, an Arab terrorist. There's a theater in Haifa, El Midan Theater, that has a show where they are glorifying the terrorist. Now, I believe in freedom of speech. There's nothing I can do about them wanting to glorify a terrorist. But I don't think it's fair for Moshe's mom to pay for it. Freedom of expression is not the obligation of the state to fund something, especially when it's a theater that promotes glorification of terrorists. When we addressed at that time the Minister of Culture and Education, we told her there's a problem here. Please stop funding this theater. It's not fair that the mom of the soldier who was kidnapped, tortured, and killed, that she should pay for this theater. And she wanted to, but the legal advisor said no. And I'm trying to understand, so why am I voting? Like, why am I even voting if the judicial branch can eventually say that that's not right? It might be on the right side of history. I'm not sure. It might be on the right side of history, but it's definitely not democratic. When Israel tried to pass a law regarding the illegal infiltrators in South Tel Aviv, I can have a whole dispute if it's illegal infiltrators or refugees, but that's not the point. The issue is that the Israeli parliament passed a law and the Supreme Court canceled it. And then they passed the law again, and the Supreme Court canceled it. And then they passed the law again, and the Supreme Court canceled it. So that's a problem. So one can argue, okay, but if you have somewhat of a constitution, it's like your Marbury versus Madison. If a law is contradicting a basic law, then cancel it. The issue is that sometimes the courts don't even use a law. I'll give you an example in a second. The second thing is that if that's the case, if the basic laws are somewhat of a constitution, then what gives the Supreme Court the right to talk about basic laws? Because when Israel passed the basic law, Israel is the nation state of the Jewish people, the Supreme Court wanted to see if that was constitutional, which I would compare it to the Supreme Court in America asking if the Constitution is constitutional. Let me elaborate a little bit more about the usage of not being connected to laws. When Netanyahu in 1999 wanted to get rid of the PLO's offices in Jerusalem, the court said it's unreasonable because it's 2 months before an election. When Yair Lapid, 4 or 5 days before the elections, had a deal with Lebanon where he gave territorial water from Israel against the basic law in Israel and did not even bring it to the Israeli parliament to talk about it, they said that that is reasonable. So from my political side, I feel that it's not really a question of veil of ignorance. You know, you don't know if you're going to come to the world as a Jew or an Arab, a woman or a man, white or black, right wing or left wing. I feel like the judicial branch is unfair and only using one position. I'll give you one last example. Judge Dalia Dorner, she mentioned how she was nominated. She said her commander in the IDF, Judge Shamgar, when she told him she wants to be a judge in the civilian life, he said, all right, we'll make sure that you'll be okay. She was a judge for the county courts for a very short period of time and became a Supreme Court justice. And then she said in her first verdict that she talked to her friend Eli, which means Judge Eliyahu Matza, that she's worried that she's not going to get the result that she wants in the way that the judges are built right now. She needs a broader range of judges. She needs more judges to decide. Now, for me, that is 3 red flags right there. A friend brings a friend brings a friend. He was her commander. Forgot to mention, she was Judge Eli Matza's commander in the army. And now she's saying, I'm not sure I will get the right result. Let's add 2 more judges to the decision. And this is what I know of. And I know of, I can continue and I can give you 100 more examples. And these are those that I know of. There are thousands that I don't know of because you cannot know. So we have a problem. And there's a dispute in Israel, how big is the problem? That's number one. The second thing is, and I think that that's the biggest problem, is the mistrust because of what I said before. And now I'm going to try, because again, I only have 20 minutes and I want to give most of the time to the Q&A. I think that both sides think that the other side has ill intent. Okay, the atmosphere and the fact that they think it's moving very, very fast and they're worried about the liberal democracy that's being taken away from them. That's one side. And the other side is saying, we've been talking about this for about 20-something years. Finally, we have a coalition that is willing to bring it up to the table. What are you talking about? You're just trying to stop us from pushing this forward. But I think that the main issue is not really the legal questions, but it's actually the ill intent that both sides think that the other side have. So let's talk a little bit about what is proposed, because right now you only have 2 bill propositions, but you have the declaration of Justice Minister Yariv Levin. Yariv Levin, a few days after the government was sworn in, he said he wants to do 4 things. 1, to cancel the ability of the court to say that something is unreasonable. For me, that is one of the easiest arguments. They're not saying that you cannot say, if I go to a some bureaucrat and he says, I don't like your face, come back in 2 weeks, I can say that that's an unreasonable decision. That's not what they're saying. They're saying that if the government decides something and the court thinks it's unfair, they cannot just use it's unreasonable. They need to connect it to a certain law. For me, that's very, very easy. I don't really understand the argument against it, but this has not been pushed yet in legislation. The second is the status of the legal advisors. The argument is that a legal advisor is supposed to advise, not to set the policy. Again, in my opinion, it's one of the easiest things. I don't really understand the controversy about that. 2 things that are very, very controversial right now. One is how do you nominate the judges? And the other is who has the final word? Is it the legislature, or is it the judicial branch? So today, okay, just one thing. The committee that nominates judges today is a little bit different. They changed it in 2008. Back in the days, basically, the judges nominated themselves. That is why you would see a lot of family members. You have about 50, 60 family members in the Supreme Court. I don't know if I'm pronouncing it properly in English. Nepotism. A lot of people bringing their own friends, family. I would argue it's still there today, but we can agree to disagree. In 2008, Gideon Sa'ar, who was a minister at the time, now he's in the opposition, he said, let's change it. So in the committee of 9, you'll have to have a 7 majority. Committee has 9 people, 3 people from the Supreme Court, 2 people from the Bar Association, 2 members of Knesset, and 2 ministers. That is the situation today. The problem with that is that if you have to have a 7 out of 9 and the Supreme Court has 3, you will always have a veto for the Supreme Court. After the change that he had, you also have a veto from the coalition. So it balances each other, but the result is that you're getting judges who are not the first option that you'd want to have. So that's not the best scenario. In addition, we had 2 scandals in Israel recently from the Bar Association. Not going to go into details, but I'll just say that it seems like some people were appointed to be judges not based on their legal abilities, but based on the fact that the guys who nominate them received some sort of physical benefits. But I don't think that that's the main case. That's anecdote. The main thing is that why is the Bar Association, with no transparency, with no protocols, nominating who's going to be a judge, a Supreme Court justice or a judge? So the proposals, I can give you their different proposals. That's actually on the table right now. The proposals are, doesn't matter which version of them, you're going to have an automatic decision by the coalition. Israel is a parliamentary system, so that means that the government is made of the coalition. So if I have 120 members of parliament, once I have 61 members, that is the government. That is our weakness. I would argue that's also our strength, and I'll explain later why. So what is the concern of many people? They're saying, look, if the coalition is going to have the decision anyway, because it doesn't matter if you have, they want to have like 9 people instead of 2 people from the Bar Association, 2 more people from the coalition, and you have to have 5 out of 9. So you're already going to have 5 always from the coalition. If that's the case, then you can nominate people who are, not professional enough. Maybe they're going to be feeling like they owe something for the politician. It's going to be bad. I'll give you my opinion. Personally, I think it would not even be a problem if it was just the Minister of Justice that would appoint the judges, and I'll explain why. We have about 700 judges in Israel. You don't nominate 50 judges every year. You nominate 4 here, 10 there, 15 there. Every couple of years, you nominate a few more judges. I cannot think of a scenario where you would have the same Minister of Justice in the next government. Our current minister is Yariv Levin. Before that, we had Gideon Sa'ar. Before that, we had Nissan Cohen. Before that, we had Ayelet Sheked. Before that, we had Tzipi Livni. So it's left, right, left, right, left, right. So to say that the judge is going to feel like they're dependent on the person that nominates them, I think that that's not a fair argument. I think that most democratic countries, most of the OECD, also in America, politicians nominate the judges. And judicial independence, which is crucial for a liberal democracy, is after you're nominated. After I've said that, in order to maintain the unity in Israel, I would go and I would stretch it as much as I can. There are many numbers between 0 and 100. You can say, let's take someone from the opposition and someone from the coalition, and they will choose 2 ex-deans of universities, and they will nominate someone. I don't know. I think it's solvable, but I think that is the most crucial part. Why is that the most crucial part? Because I asked this to all of my friends who are from the far left, and I asked them, let's say that Itamar Ben-Gvir, Bezalel Smotrich, Avi Maoz, all these people that you don't like because they're not liberal, let's say that instead of going to politics, they would go into the Supreme Court, and they would be the Supreme Court justices. Would you still want the Supreme Court to have the final word? And they would all say, obviously not. So it's like, okay, so you're not really thinking that the Supreme Court is fair. You're thinking, I like his approach. And that, for me, is not a fair game. That's the first thing. The second thing that is on the table right now is the overruling or override clause, which says that if there's tension between the parliament and the Supreme Court, the parliament can override a court's decision. The person who came up with that was actually Aharon Barak, Justice Aharon Barak, who created, I would argue, a lot of the problems that we are facing right now. Is the former president of the Supreme Court. He came up with this idea for the law that's called Basic Law, Freedom of Occupation. He said, if you want to override this the decision or this law, just write a law and says, we understand this is against the basic law, but we still think you're allowed to do it. If I'm the person who limited myself with basic laws, I'm also the person that can change that. So now the argument is with which majority? There are different proposals. One of the things that's on the table right now is the following. If the court wants to cancel a law in Israel, it cannot be a regular court. It has to be the Supreme Court. And it cannot be a regular majority. It cannot be through 3 against 2. It has to be a supermajority. What are the numbers? Right now, they're suggesting 80. I don't know. And then they're saying, but if the parliament wants to pass a law anyways, and they pass it with over 61, meaning more than 50% of the parliament, it'll pass, unless the Supreme Court cancels that unanimously. Now, the problem is that if I'm changing the judges, you'll say, well, what if you get one judge inside that's corrupt? You'll never get a unanimous vote. Fair. Maybe they should change it into 13, 14, I don't know, but it needs to be a super majority. Why? In my opinion, giving my opinion, if it's 7 versus, we have 15 Supreme Court justices. If it's 8 versus 7, then it's a moral decision. And I don't think moral decisions should be done in a court of law. So that should be brought back to the parliament. And then they say, well, another proposal is it's not going to be passed in this parliament, it needs to be passed in the next parliament. So not only did you have to pass it in 61, it will only be passed in the next parliament if, again, they voted for 61, which means when people are going to the elections, they know that they're trying to vote for a coalition that will pass this law or not pass this law. In addition, wait, I have to, again, it's Masha to put everyone, thank you. No, you don't know who that is? Someone is on mute.
Guys, can you make sure you're muted? Whoever joined just now, you need to mute yourself, please. Thank you.
Thank you. So that's one more thing that you will only pass it in the next parliament. Now, there are a few arguments that people are saying against it. They're saying, well, Ran, what if they'll pass a law with 61 NKs and they'll say no more elections? And that's, I think, is a very, very weak argument, because in the basic law, knesset, the parliament, it already says if you want to change that, you have to have 80 plus MKs. So the legislator in the 50s, I think, was better than the legislator that we have now, already thought about all that. Before the judicial revolution that took place in the 90s, in 1953, they already had a discussion regarding freedom of expression, and it's already decided that you have freedom of expression. So all these things are not really the main issue. The main question is not really what if the parliament decides that we're gonna become a kingdom and not a democracy. The two strongest questions that I think that people who are opposing the reform should have asked is this: what happens, not if they cancel democracy, but what happens if they cancel laws that makes Israel a country I'm not very proud of? For instance, no gay parade in Jerusalem, or women cannot be members of rabbinical council. And that, I think, is the strongest argument against the reform. Another really strong argument should be, you have not decided what a basic law is. What do I mean by that? If I will physically look at the basic law, the parliament, it's a very, very, very long law, and many articles there are being debated every parliament. If I look at the law, that's the nation state law or human dignity and freedom, it's a very short law. It looks more like a constitution, like wordings that can mean many things. So is basic law a constitution or not? For me, the answer for that question needs to be solved in the parliament, not in the courts, which is why we are tangled in all of this problem to begin with. But it's a fair argument to say, okay, so you're just going to legislate a horrible law that says no gay parade in Jerusalem and call it basic law. If it's a basic law, it's part of the Constitution, so the Supreme Court would not be able to address it. I think these are the two strongest, again, I'm trying to be super fair against my agenda. These are the two strongest arguments that people can have. Now I'll try to defend the arguments. And again, just for those who came late, I do have empathy towards the people who are protesting. I don't think they're faking it. I'm close to wrapping it up, Masha. They're saying it's a bad atmosphere to do it when you have a prime minister who may be corrupt, is being accused. You have a minister who was convicted. You have people who are not liberal in this parliament. I don't trust this atmosphere. It's been done too fast. And you might make Israel, maybe it'll be a democracy, but not a liberal democracy. So here's my answers. Here are my answers for all of these issues. Number one, me personally, Ran, have been working at this for the past 15 years. Yariv Levin has been working at this for the past 13 years. Professor Daniel Friedman has been working at this when he was Minister of Justice in 2009. Minister Chaim Ramon, former Minister Chaim Ramon, these are people from the left. Those who are mentioning now, Friedman and Ramon. It's not really Netanyahu. It's about a problem with democracy. Even if I get the result that I like, I don't like it that the court is the one that's making it, and it's a problem. So to say why now, you cannot ask me for 20 years why now. People have been saying that the right-wingers now more than others are saying that it's very important. But for years, people from the right and for the left have been trying to pass it because they're saying you are not allowing people to have a seat at the table. That's number one. Number two, if I were an elected official, just to calm everyone down, I would say I'm stopping. I'm going to give you 1 month, not doing anything, just have a discussion, just feel better. My legal understanding of it is that this, I'm sorry, it's not a real argument. I used to work for the legal department of the parliament. I don't think they're rushing anything. I think this is the proper procedure to pass a law. I've passed hundreds of laws when I was there. I know what it's like when you're rushing a law. If you want to rush the legislation, you can say, I'm avoiding the time that you have to wait between votes or stuff like that. You know, I'm going to bring it up in the committee on a Monday, and I'm going to vote for it in the plenum on a Wednesday. That's not the case. So when people are saying it's so rushed, I'm like, how long do you think it should take to pass laws? We are discussing this in the Israeli parliament. People have been working at this some for a decade and a half, some for over 2 decades. I disagree. I think that this is really a regular procedure. But just for the sake of argument, again, I would stop it. And lastly, and that's the most important part, I disagree with the fact it's going to make Israel less liberal. I believe not just in democracy, I believe in a liberal democracy, which means we have protection for minorities, which means that the executive and legislative branches need to armor themselves so a future legislator cannot take down the basic norms of society. That's what I believe in. I'm a conservative, small government, strong citizens. That's my approach in general. What is shocking to me is that I feel like everyone is talking only from position and not from a real concern. Why am I saying that? Because just before these past elections, they wanted to pass a bill that says that you will not have an election for the next 2 years. That came from the left, from the Benny Gantz party, from Liberman, from the Israeli Democratic Institute. I'm like, I'm sorry, that's what you're always concerned. You're worried that this reform will do that. You propose that. The reform does not propose that. You propose. Or another crazy proposal for me, a minority government in a parliamentary system. Minority government in a parliamentary system, for me, it's tyranny. It's a minority judging over all of the majority. So, okay, so that's that. But again, the strongest argument is, Ran, what if so many people want to cancel gay parade in Jerusalem? In my opinion, it's not something that can happen, not just because of the fact that Amir Ohana, first openly gay minister, now first openly gay speaker of the Knesset is there, but because I don't believe that you have 61 people who will vote for that. And if you have 61 people who will vote for that, I cannot understand how you will not have 15 judges who will oppose it. And if you don't have 15 judges who will oppose it, I'm trying to understand the next elections, you're going to have to vote for it again, and you're going to have again a coalition of 61. Now, our downside, our flaws are also our strengths, and I'll explain. Israel is a parliamentary system. We are now in the 25th Knesset, but we are in our 37th government. The previous government, in case you forgot, which by the way, suggested laws that are very similar to the ones that are being suggested with no better checks and balances, including the government before that and before that and before that. The previous government spent 4 elections trying to get rid of Netanyahu. And what they were able to achieve at the end is a very unique government with the Meretz party, far left, Lieberman used to be right, now left, Bennett used to be right, I don't know now, and the Arab parties, and Labor Initiative. So this really chunk that was only against Netanyahu, it fell down because of what? Because of the argument of chametz in Passover in hospitals. What does that mean? It means that whenever a small party pushes the line too much, the government will fall. It's enough that our Minister of Security, Gallant, will evacuate 2 more settlements, and Smotrich will say, the religious Zionists will say, I'm not willing to stay in this government. It's enough that Ben Gvir will go on Temple Mount 3 more times, and the Haredi parties will say, we're not there. So I'm not happy about it. My perfect scenario would be a written constitution and a Bill of Rights. I don't think that can be passed right now. But the pathological, really bad case that can be, but it's extremely unlikely, scares me personally a lot less than hundreds or thousands of decisions who are ignoring human rights. I'll give you a few examples. During the disengagement, the Supreme Court said it was fine to hold girls who were 12 and 14 in custody until their trial. I'm not sure I would accept that for a terrorist. When a woman is being raped in a hospital by an Arab, the judge will say it was very, very fast. He's going to get only 5 months. If someone is being stabbed in the back with a knife, but the knife is less than 4 fingers, the judge can say, we're not sure he was trying to murder you. We're going to give the person 5 months. But when someone is throwing a shoe at a judge, it's 3 years in prison. To me, as a citizen, I don't believe that they're protecting always human rights. I believe that they're protecting one side. And that scares me a lot more than the what if they will all decide, and if the judges will not agree, and if, again, you'll have an election, and again, you'll have a coalition who, again, will vote against some liberal laws that I would not like and support personally, but I cannot really see the scenario happening. And I could be wrong, and I'm open for discussion. And again, for the people to be calm, I would go way beyond what is proposed right now. But anyways, I'm going to stop it here and open it for Q&A. I have a lot more to say, but I hope I gave you the general understanding of what's happening.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Okay. We got a couple of questions. David has been waiting patiently. So he's asking if you could explain the basis of standing to bring a case. Many of these cases call the concept into question. As I understand, there is no requirement for standing in Israel. Nearly anyone from anywhere for any reason can sue directly to the Israeli Supreme Court.
That is true. I really hope that Minister Levin and MK Simcha Rothman will address that in the future. But right now, that's not in the agenda. It's not even something that Yariv Levin said that he's going to do. I hope that he will change it. I think it's horrible. It does, again, from a legal standpoint, it doesn't make any sense to me. The whole reason why you have a court is to solve conflicts. To say that you're not a side to the case, you're not an Israeli citizen, but you're not happy with the Israeli government, then you're suing it. For me, it doesn't make any sense. You don't need standing. But again, that's a different topic. It's not really what is suggested right now. I'm sure that when they will suggest that, again, they'll say the end of democracy. And I understand their agenda. What they're saying is, some people in Israel say the courts are protecting minorities. I'm all for protecting minorities. I'm also a minority. I'm a minority by opinion. I'm a straight white man, but I'm very hawkish, pro free market. I'm not a lot of people are like my opinion. So I'm a minority in opinion. I want to protect minorities, women, LGBTQ, Arabs, vegans, I don't care. But I want the people to protect it, the parliament. And I don't believe that it's the role of the Justice Department or the judicial branch, because first of all, it feels like they're not really protecting minority rights. They're protecting the left side of the left Ba'ath party. That's number one. Number two, that is not the proper way to make a decision. I had an argument with the former head of Peace Now, and he said, and I'm very happy he said it, he said, even if 120 members of the parliament say one thing, but the Supreme Court says something else, you need to listen to the Supreme Court. And I'm like, look, you just don't understand the concept of democracy. I'm in a liberal democracy, yes, you are also supposed to protect minorities, but at the end of the day, majority rules, especially if it's done in the proper procedure. It's not the tyranny of the majority, it's really majority rules. So that's where we disagree. But again, the standing is not even brought as it's not even on the table yet. I hope it will be, but it's not even on the table. The two things that are on the table is how you nominate judges and who has the final word. Is it the parliament or the Supreme Court?
Okay. Question from Corinne. Corinne, do you want to ask the question or do you want to read it?
No, I can read the question. Hi, Ran.
Hello.
Okay, so I have a question about Piskat Gabrut, which basically the proposal is that the Knesset will be able to overcome and disqualify laws by the High Court, meaning that if we have 120 ministers in the Knesset, if you have 61 of them, that's enough to pass a law that will basically eliminate what the court said.
Yes.
I am very concerned about that, because not only this opens a window to more corruption, what does that mean about the judicial system? Like, why do we need it anyways? We can just go to the Knesset, see what they say, they'll make their decisions, and that's it. It doesn't matter what the court says. That's my question.
Yep.
What do you think about that?
I'll try to present your question in a better way, because I think that was not the best way that you can, again, maybe I'm wrong, but I'll try to be your advocate. Because if that's the question, then why do we need the parliament? I can just ask the Supreme Court. Because right now, it's not even the Supreme Court, it's regular courts. They can say, I disagree with this law, I cancel it. Or it's unreasonable in canceling it, or I think it's against, I'll give you an example. In 2000, I think it's 2011, I might be wrong. The Finance Committee decided that if you have a car, you will get less money for unemployment. I don't know if it's a good decision, but it's mind-blowing to me that the Supreme Court canceled that decision. And I'm thinking, wait, so you had a committee in the parliament, the public came, professors, people from Social Security, they all gave their opinion, and they decided that if you're unemployed, you're supposed to get an X amount of money, and if you're unemployed and have a car, you'll get an X amount minus 200 shekels. And the Supreme Court canceled that and said this is against human dignity and freedom. And I'm like, what? Why? You know more about accounting and economics than all of the people who are in the committee. So the question could be, why do I need the parliament? The Supreme Court can just decide on everything. A better question for you to say is, Ran, what happens if the parliament, which is now filled with people who are not very liberal, and they will pass laws that hurt women, hurt gay people, hurt Arabs, hurt whatever, and there's no one who will stop them? I think that's right. I think that's the strongest arguments against this. Am I wrong?
No, you're not wrong. I think that's pretty accurate.
Great. And I, who believe in liberal democracy, would not like this to happen. So people are asking me, you just trust the MKs? I'm like, no, I don't trust the MKs. I trust the people. So the suggestion is, in my opinion, is fairly balanced. In order to calm people down, including Karine, I would balance this even more. But again, here's what the law says, the proposed law. It's not the law, it's a proposition that can be changed. And by the way, there are many different versions. So I'm reading the one that's right now that we have right now. Right now, what we have is a proposal that, first of all, every override is limited by time. Just to be on the same page. Whenever you're overriding a law, there's limitations. It's not just you override and cancel. The questions that are not honest, or what if they cancel elections? You cannot do that. You cannot cancel freedom of speech. You cannot cancel elections. You cannot cancel democracy. You can pass laws that hurt, no gay parade in Jerusalem, no women in rabbinical councils. And I'm against it, but okay. So if that happens, it needs to be passed. If it's passed and the Supreme Court in a supermajority cancels that, it cancels it. Or if it was passed in a procedure that's not proper, if it's contradiction to another law, if it's a strong violation of human rights, if there's conflict of interest, sababa. The issue is that the Supreme Court cannot cancel it based on what? Like the example that I gave. So you're giving I'm giving on your behalf a very pathological example, which I don't see happening. And the issue is that people ignore the norm that is happening, which is regular laws are being canceled. So why do you need the parliament? So, okay, so I gave a regular majority in the parliament and the Supreme Court cancels it. Then they can say, well, what if we have a 61 plus? 61 plus is very easy. Every government is 61. Right? So you're saying, Ran, it's very easy to get 61 to pass a law. And then I say, okay, what if the court cancels that unanimously? Then it cancels, but then you can say, Ran, but you're also changing the way that you elect judges. And let's say they both pass as is. So you'll have one judge who's corrupt and that's destroyed. And again, it's a proposal. It can be 14 and 13 and 12, whatever. I'm going with you. So it's not in this parliament, it's in the next parliament. So you know that when you're voting for the elections next time, you know that when you're voting, you might vote for in these last elections, about 11% of the Likud voters voted for the religious Zionist party. They voted for Ben Gvir and Smotrich. And they did it, in my opinion, because they were worried that Netanyahu would go with Benny Gantz instead of with them. They wanted to make sure that he's going to go with them. So I don't see these 11% saying, yeah, I don't think anyone's happy with this government. I think everyone in Israel voted against the other side and not for his side. And the difference between you and I here is not that I trust the politicians, is that I trust the public. And if the public, again, time after time, is willing to vote for a coalition, which has never, ever, ever, ever happened in Israel, not a single case ever in Israel, you're saying you think that there's more than 51% of the Israeli public, or that Meretz and Labor will not join forces just to prevent this. You're saying, yes, there's going to be enough people in Israel who will vote for the same coalition again. My personal opinion, in this government right now, you don't have 61 MKs who will pass a law that says no gay parade in Jerusalem or no women in religious councils. In my opinion, Amir Ohana, as a speaker of the Knesset, is one example, but you have about at least 15 MKs from the Likud and at least 5 MKs from the religious Zionists who would say, sorry, that's not, I'm not willing to accept this. In fact, I would argue that you would not have 20 MKs who would pass this. But the best example I can give you is actually the argument that usually people say against the reform. If people are saying the Supreme Court has only canceled 22 laws, it means that the parliament does not always passes horrible laws. Right now, there was a proposal, a horrible proposal in my mind, by the Shas party that said, if a woman is not dressed modest near the Kotel, she can go to jail. Now, what's amazing, what canceled, it even make it to the plenum. Why? The coalition told them, look, you want to pass this, you're done. And I think that for me is the biggest defense. I'm not saying it's the best system. Again, what I would prefer, Constitution, understanding what basic laws are, Bill of Rights, that'll be the best. But my experience, and I cannot have an exception for this, this is what's canceling laws. The fact that the coalition are saying we're not willing to accept this. Every member of every party knows that if they will succeed too much, their home base would like them, but they will not be in the next coalition. Everyone understands that. And that is why the previous government fell. The previous government, their whole agenda was anti-Netanyahu. Correct me if I'm wrong. I don't see anything that's connecting Lieberman, Meretz, Bennett, Arab Party. The only thing that they had in combined is they didn't like Netanyahu. And they were willing to make this government fall down because Nitzan Horowitz from the Meretz Party took it one step too further to say, I'm going to talk about religion and state in a place where someone was not willing to accept this. For me, that is it's not the only balance. It's not the only checks and balance that I have, but it's the strongest one that I have. Not because I trust the MKs, because I trust the people. So again, the scenario is you'll find enough people to promote this law. I don't see how, but let's see you found them. The Supreme Court is unable to cancel it. And then you have elections on it. And again, you're saying people are going to vote for the exact same coalition or a coalition that will vote for it. It's a chance. I'm just saying, you're saying there's a 0.007% chance that there'll be no gay parade in Jerusalem. I'm saying, okay, I'm not against gay parades in Jerusalem, but for a 0.0007% chance of no gay parade in Jerusalem, I'm not willing to have the situation right now when someone is being stabbed in the back with a knife and the judges are telling them, you know, it's less than 4 fingers, there's no attempted murder here. I'm like, okay. Or to have the Supreme Court saying, this is reasonable, this is not reasonable. Okay, I think that the main problem here is democracy. But Kari, let me ask you this. Let's say that Avi Maoz, for those who don't know, Avi Maoz is probably the most anti-LGBTQ, I think, the most anti-LGBTQ person in the parliament. Let's say that instead of investing his life to be in the parliament, he would invest his life in the legal system. And he would have become a justice in the Supreme Court. And then they pass a law that says that women can be fighter pilots. Personally, I'm supporting that. I trained women to be fighter pilots. And then he says, that's against my values as a Jew. So I'm canceling the law that says that. You would obviously say, hold on, but most people in Israel support such an agenda. So for me, it feels like it's not really, again, a veil of ignorance. It's just right now, the Supreme Court is pushing for the right agenda. It is pushing for the right agenda on some issues, or the liberal agenda, the right agenda. But on many issues, it's promoting a horrible agenda. And for me, it's not, even if it's in my agenda, I don't want him to call the shots, because that's not fair. It makes me feel like a second-class citizen. And just imagine that people in Israel, for those who don't know, people in Israel are furious. I might be wrong. I don't remember anything like this. Not when the nation-state bill was proposed, not when the Oslo Accords, not before Rabin was assassinated. I don't remember such a heated discussion in Israel ever. People are saying they're not going to serve. I mean, WhatsApp group tomorrow, I'm going to talk to a platoon I don't even know, just to calm them down. They asked me to calm them down. They're saying, we don't know if you can serve. I recognize it. What happens if they win? What happens if the protesters in Israel win? It's the end of Israel as a sovereign state. It means that the minority, the same people who were not able to pass the threshold in the elections, were able to create such a fuss. Let's say you have 500,000 people who are against the reform. Let's say you have 1 million people who are against the reform, but you have 2.5 million people who are pro the reform. So how should they feel if they're saying, even in this coalition, we are unable to fulfill our agenda? And I can tell you, people say, we didn't know that that's what the election is about. I can tell you that everyone from the right-wing camp knew exactly that this is what the election is about. Are you with Netanyahu or against Netanyahu? And the legal reform. It's before Judea and Samaria, before the illegal infiltrators in South Tel Aviv, before the Bedouins in the Negev, before social economic issues. It's before everything. It's, can I even bring up my opinion to the table? Do I have a seat at the table? Because right now, the way the system works in Israel is that there's no seat at the table for people who are not in the position of the left side. Saying that, again, if I were an elected official, I would, just to calm people down, I would say, let's open to what you have to suggest. I'm open. I'm not sure I like 61. Maybe you should add maybe 63. Maybe Daniel Friedman said maybe it doesn't matter the numbers, but make sure you have 5 people from the opposition. But I will tell you one thing. I don't think I know that in the past, a lot of people really liked these laws. How do I know? Because I have it in my computer. If anyone wants, I can send it. It's in Hebrew, but I can send it. The people who are now opposing it proposed the same laws. And in the Constitution and Law Committee, MK Simcha Rotman said to ask one of the MKs, he said, you're against this law? This is what you proposed in the previous government. And he said, no, it was a completely different law. You're lying. I said, all right, let's read it. And he literally read article after article and said, this is what you proposed. And he said, you're right. There's one thing that's different. In your proposal, you said the parliament needs to pass it in 61 one time. In my proposal, they have to pass it 61 3 times. So I don't know. It seems more balanced. Not by the way, just to wrap it up, if I were to write a reform, I would write something different, saying that the reform as is, it's not perfect. I would go, I think it's fine. Saying that if I were an elected official, just to calm everyone down, I would say, let's find something in the middle so you'll be relaxed.
Wow. Okay. Thank you. We do have a couple of more questions. Oops, hold on. I pressed the wrong button. If I can take the privilege, please, and ask my own question, and that is, I'm looking online. I'm looking at the massive protests that are happening. The question that I had was, as somebody who is very experienced in organizing people, I know that nothing is spontaneous and everything costs money. So my question is, do we know who is funding these protests? Selfishly, I'll tell you, when I saw the drone picture of the huge Israeli flag, I happen to know this flag probably cost at least $10,000. I want that flag. Can I get that flag? And that is what made me think, who is paying hundreds of thousands of dollars for these protests?
So I can tell you what I know, but I don't think it's a strong answer. I know that in the beginning of the protest, there were a lot of far-left organizations that I think that the reason why they are worried about the reform is not because of their concern for a liberal democracy, but because of their concern that their personal agenda would not be still here. I know that Ehud Barak, former prime minister, and Bogi Yalon, former minister of defense, and Zehava Gal'on a former MK and head of the Meretz party, and other people, and Shimon Peres's son and other people are involved. And some of them are also investing money. But I think that, to be fair, I don't think that that's the biggest issue. I think that the biggest issue is the people who are there authentically. Again, I'm not happy to say this. It saddens me. I wish I could tell you, Masha. And by the way, there are some anecdotes. Foreign countries, Iran sponsored. You have it, okay? You have Iran's also sponsoring. I don't think that that's the main issue. The main issue that concerns me, that saddens me, is my friend from Army service, who are saying, I don't know if I can live here. Now, I don't think they're correct, but I don't think that they're brainwashed. So I think that there's something very sensitive here. I sometimes stuff happens, and I don't think it's no longer a temper tantrum. I think that they are really, really concerned. I think they're wrong, but I don't think that they're faking it. I think that they don't understand the concept. Maybe they are. I think there's a problem with the consequences, because you cannot shout anything after this. That's it. You cannot, if you go any further than that, then you shut down the country. When fighter pilots are saying we're not going to serve, then I don't think they were brainwashed. I think that they heard from the media too much. I think the media is a joke on this matter. I'll tell you why. My terminology is a legal reform. They keep saying it's a revolution, it's a regime shift, stuff like that. If someone would tell me, I'm taking away your democracy, I'm like, oh, I'm not sure I want to serve also. So I think that that's a change in mind, but they're not stupid. They're not stupid people. They have genuine concerns, like what Karin was saying. And I think that that's the strongest argument, the most fair argument. But I think that there are people who are putting fuel on the adding fuel to the fire. Is that an expression in English? They're adding fuel to the fire, and they're making sure that the country is burned down. And I think that I know that that's their decision right now. They're saying, first we'll have protest every Saturday night. I'm quoting from forgot his name. I'm quoting from one of a very famous activist. First, we'll have protest every Saturday night. Second, we will block the roads here and there to disrupt the country. Thirdly, we'll make sure that people divest from Israel. It's like a BDS movement from within. We'll divest fundings from Israel, and then we will make sure that people won't serve in the reserves. Then they will have to listen to us. In my personal opinion, that's horrible. As someone who finished 2022 with 70 plus days of Army reserves, I never thought that I'm not going to serve because I dislike this government. But there's something that's happening here. I don't know what it is. Yes, Masha, you are correct. Some money from Iran, some far left organizations. I know that in Tel Aviv, twice a day, you have strategic consulting groups that are saying how we can make this more. But at the end of the day, when my good friends feel like they need to go and protest, that's a problem. That something is wrong here. I blame, by the way, the government. The fact that people outside of Israel think that Israel is becoming a dictatorship, it means that you're gonna have this press conference, explain this in English, because I think the proposal itself it's very reasonable, but you need to write it in English and explain what you're doing. Otherwise, people are gonna believe whatever they read. So that's my best. It's not a strong answer. It's my best answer. I don't know. Something bad is happening here that maybe I'm wrong, but I don't remember anything like that before this in Israel. I've never heard people saying. I've heard people saying I'm not going to serve many times, but not from the people who are saying it today.
Mm-hmm. Okay, I would love to have friends of Club Z to chime in and to ask questions, guys. If you have any questions, if not, I'm going to keep going down the chat. And Olga, do you want to choose one of your questions, please?
Okay, let me go with the first one. Ron, thank you very much for this. As a quick comment, you laid it down in my mind quite simply. So I'm going to be leaving this even more confused as to why it's such an issue, if that makes sense. Like, why are people struggling to unpack it? Anyway. So my first question is picking back off of Marsha's in a little way, and that is in relation to the funding of the protests. But broadly, to the point that in many articles that I've read, has been talk of the displeasure of the Biden administration in relation to these proposed judicial reforms, and the administration making it very public that it does not agree with them, including in manifesting this displeasure, funding some of these protests. So I'd be grateful for your thoughts on the interference, if these reports are true, of America in the local affairs of a sovereign country and how this is impacting Israeli life.
So first of all, I will say I think I'm speaking on behalf of most Israelis, America is our closest ally. We want to maintain the relationship. It's very important. Saying that, yes, America interferes and I don't like it. And I think that it comes to the main disagreement between me and the other side in Israel. And that is, what is a democracy? And again, I believe in a liberal democracy, but before that, what is a democracy? I forgot to mention that people are saying protest every Saturday, they also say pressure from foreign countries. It's a technique to change the public sphere in Israel. Also, like the economic pressure, we will withdraw money from Israel. You see, the reform is causing economic failure. Okay, but you caused it. I don't think that any country ever should be allowed to tell other countries what to do, especially when it's not really a regime change. It's, in my opinion, making Israel a lot more democratic. Some people believe in a concept called the gatekeepers. Now, in America, the gatekeepers is a legal term for corporate. It's a different term. In Israel, when they say gatekeepers, they mean the minister, he has an agenda. He has an agenda. He has to, make sure that his base is happy. The legal advisor is working for the public's good. He's working for the broader agenda. I don't believe in the concept of gatekeepers. That's not how I understand democracy. By the way, America had a similar debate in what is called the progressive era, not progressive like today dressed as a cap, the progressive era, Roosevelt era, around Roosevelt. But you know what I'm talking about. But is democracy different people trying to make a decision together, and then you have to compromise and have your balances? Or is democracy the best virtues, the best values? Are we talking about the rights of the minority or a majority decision? Now, I believe in liberal democracy, so I also care about the rights of the minority. But at the end of the day, democracy for me is the will of the people. By the way, the will of the people is not just the will of the majority, it's the will of the people. That's why I believe in the restraints of the legislature itself, but it's the will of the people at the end of the day. And when people are using America to put pressure on Israel, and then my friends are saying, you don't see how this legal reform is hurting our ties. I'm like, it's not the legal reform that's hurting our ties. It's your friends who are telling Americans to put pressure on Israel that's hurting our ties. Because I don't think, again, for me to address this to an American audience is a lot easier than for me to address this to an Israeli audience. I don't think Americans are so, oh my God, that's so undemocratic. You want politicians to be involved with nominating judges. I don't think Americans would say that's crazy. I think that Americans would not accept it. I don't know if you notice how they nominate judges. There's one video, it's from a while ago, but when I forgot her name, a female judge was about to be appointed. A senator asked her, you said you appreciate Judge Aaron Barak. Aaron Barak is known for his extreme activism. Is he your hero? Because if that's the case, you can definitely not be a justice in the Supreme Court in America. So for Americans, I think what I'm trying to push for is making Israel more democratic. To ask for America to put pressure on Israel, and America has the ability to put pressure on Israel, in my understanding of democracy, it's undemocratic. Basically, it's people who are feeling like the power is being taken away from them because they lost in elections for the past 40 years. Okay, in the past 40 years, Israel is more tilted to the right. The vast majority of the Israeli public is more conservative, not conservative the way I'm conservative, but more conservative in family values and not trusting the PA. Okay, so apart from a few anecdotes with Yitzhak Rabin, Ehud Barak, Ehud Olmert, and now the previous government, the right is in control for about 40 years. But the left has control in the academia, in the media, and in the courts. And they're saying, wait, if you're taking this from us, we're really losing our powers. You are really going to rule here. And I think that's what is really happening, that the streams behind the discussion. I hope I answered your question.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
All right, great. I don't see any more questions. So Olga, you want to shoot your second question? And then
well, it's more in relation to what I understood the So before the elections, I didn't follow much of it and the Israeli elections, but my understanding was that one of the issues was judicial reform. So now you have these protests against, if my understanding is that one of the issues was judicial reform that parties are running on, you've got the people and then by extension, external factors rebelling against the will of the majority. And that's just, it seems absurd. And I was wondering if you had any thoughts on that, because that's in effect what's happening, right? They've said, this is what we want. And now they're there, and everybody else that doesn't like what the majority have said are protesting against it, but that's undemocratic.
I agree with you, but just again, to make your argument as fair as I can, if I was my own devil's advocate, think what people are saying, we didn't know that that's what we're voting on. I'm fine with a legal reform, but not this one. You're doing it too fast. You have a prime minister who might be corrupt. You have a corrupt minister who's in office. And the coalition is not very liberal. I'm worried about my rights as a woman, as a gay person, as an Arab, as a vegan. I don't know. So I think that's their argument. I'm not disrespecting their arguments or feelings. I disrespect. I don't even disrespect. I disagree on a factual level, but I think that their feelings are sincere. And now they're showing all these polls saying, "Look, the public is against it." Now I can show you the videos of Gideon Sa'ar and Yair Lapid and Benny Gantz saying this is what the election is about. If Netanyahu's chunk will win, they will pass this reform, which again is funny because they wanted to pass the same reform a government ago, but or in 2 governments ago. And I have this all on tape. I have Yair Lapid on tape, not on tape like I recorded him. He was giving a presentation about that. But there is an argument to say, well, why like this? And again, not because I think that there's something wrong with the reform, but I also cannot ignore their feelings. I'm not Ben Shapiro. Facts don't care about your feelings, but I care about your feelings. Okay, like I care about your feelings because these are my brothers. But I agree with you at the core of it. That's why I'm saying, imagine that they will prevail. It's the end of Israel. If people are now saying, I'm not willing to serve if this reform passes, what if I say I'm not willing to serve if this reform does not pass? So let's say not 51% of the Israeli public is pro this reform, but without a doubt, more people in Israel are pro this reform than people who are against this reform. I don't think anyone can oppose that. So yes, you're right. And I think that that's the issue. They don't understand democracy the way you and I understand democracy. They're saying it's not the will. I had a conversation yesterday with former MK Teila Friedman. She's, let's say, central left, very feminist. And I asked her again the same question. I asked her, Teila, if 120 members of parliament decide that women cannot be in the rabbinical council, it's not my agenda. It's not your agenda. But if 120 members of parliament decide that women cannot be in a rabbinical council, and the Supreme Court says that they can, what do you think? He said, no, I'm not willing to have anyone say I'm not a human. I'm saying that's not the proposal. No one's saying you're not a human. No one is saying you cannot have freedom of speech, vote, be elected. They're saying that yes, your rights are going to be hurt. Not my personal agenda. I don't see this happening, but just as a theoretical discussion. So me and her, we understand democracy differently. For them, the liberal part of a liberal democracy is far more important than the democratic part of a democratic liberal democracy.
Thank you.
All right. And I honestly, I think that is the core. I think in general, it sounds to me like the Israeli public has just not been educated on what democracy is. So again, one of the things that many Americans don't realize that, for example, America is not a democracy, we're a republic, right? We're a democratic republic. And that just goes back to sort of like your civics education in school that has failed in Israel. And I hope that, I don't know what, silly, I feel silly asking this question, but what can we do from here to help?
It's a good question. I think you can just calm everyone down. But But I want to, if I can, I want to say just a few more things here. We did not have the Federalist Papers in Israel when Israel was created. I think it's a miracle that Israel is a democracy, because Israel is surrounded by undemocratic countries, and our founding fathers came from countries who were not democratic. And again, I believe in a liberal democracy, not just democracy, liberal democracy. By the way, Masha, you are right, you're a democratic republic. When I refer to America, I say a presidential democracy, but that's just for the different terminology. But here are a few things that bother me, again, addressing this reform, because in Kohelet, what we actually do, what I've been doing for the past 8.5 years in Kohelet, and what I've been doing for about 15 years, is comparative constitutional law. I looked at other countries, I saw what they were doing, and I would say, okay, this is interesting. It's different than Israel. I'm not saying we have to be just like anyone else. I'm a Montesquieu type of person. I think because of my conservative values, I think every country is a little bit different and have different rules. But it's just interesting to see that Israel is very, very different. But here's what my argument against the charts that I see that are being passed now on Facebook and other social media. They're saying, look, Israel does not have a constitution, so why are you suggesting this reform? For me, it's a very bad argument if you're saying that, because if Israel does not have a constitution, then the court has no power to do anything. The whole reason why the Supreme Court says that they're canceling laws, that they're canceling government decisions, that they're saying that the minister doesn't know what he's doing, is because they believe that basic law is somewhat of a constitution. So they just pull down the carpet out of their own argument. And then they say, look, if you want to have this reform, you forget that in America, for instance, you have other checks and balances. Like in America, you have 2 houses. Like, yes, America has 2 houses. It has nothing to do with Israel. America is a federal concept. You have the state and the federal, and the checks and balances are between the state and the federal. Israel is not a state and federal model. So these checks and balances are not relevant for Israel. It has nothing to do with what we're saying here. And then they can say, a few more examples that they have. Oh, in Israel, because we're a parliamentary system, basically we don't really have 2 authorities. We only have 1 branch, which is the executive branch. But again, that's historically not true, because there is a flaw, a built-in flaw in all parliamentary democracies, where the parliament is made of, where the executive branch, the government is made out of the parliament, the coalition. But again, that's also our strong point, because we are at the 25th parliament and 37th government. So you cannot really say that you only have 1 branch. Obviously, the legislator is able to take down the government far easier than the government being able to have limitations over the parliament. And lastly, people say it's extremely crucial to have separation of powers when it comes to the judicial branch. And I agree with that. But what Israelis have not learned in the Federalist Papers, the wallet and the sword. The executive branch has a sword, the legislative branch has a wallet, right? And I forgot if it's Federal 78, I don't remember which chapter. And the judicial branch has no sword and no wallet. Well, that's not the case in Israel. In Israel, the Supreme Court has a wallet and has a sword. It can say, if a Jewish house is built, not a Jewish house, if 1 meter or 1 yard of a Jewish house is built on Arab territory, don't give compensation to the Arab family, destroy the house. When it's the other way around, if an Arab house is built on Jewish property, they say, don't destroy the house, compensate them. So the Israeli Supreme Court has a wallet and a sword. Because of that, Professor Daniel Friedman, again, a super lefty guy who was Minister of Justice, wrote a book called The Wallet and the Sword regarding the Israeli Supreme Court. Separation of powers is not when you nominate the person, it's after he's being nominated. And I think just like in America, I don't think people assume that judges or justice, they have an agenda. That's fine. That's my argument. If judges would not have an agenda, why do you care who I'm nominating? Because I believe that we're human beings and we have an agenda. Right now, I'm concerned with the fact that judges have nominated themselves and their family members for I don't know, a very, very long time. And I'm saying you didn't let anyone who has a conservative approach join in. By the way, what is a conservative judge to me? It's not like in America. It's not what you think about abortions or gun rights. It's, do you follow the law? That's my request. I'm asking for the judges, follow the law. According to Judge Aaron Barak, the law is 50%, then the judge's opinion is 50%. And I'm like, I disagree with that. Anyways, So that I just wanted to add that. So what can you do, Masha? You can try to explain what I've said to other people. But I would say be extremely sensitive. This is it's a very, very difficult time for me. Since I came back from the conference, I think I've been given more than 15 lectures per week in Israel, and they don't pay as well in America as they do in America. And I've just been going from one place to the other to explain this to people. And I've noticed that once you're able to have a dialogue, then usually there's less tension, but many places are not willing to hear me. Just will be on the same page. It's more difficult for me right now here than it was when I was in UC Davis in 2012, and people were heckling me, calling me child molester, rapist, murderer. It's more difficult for me right now here in Israel. I was speaking in a town, I'm not going to mention the name. They had a sign, "We must resist," and beneath it, "To Forum Kohelet." People are saying, "I hate gay people." People are saying, "I hate women." People are saying, "I hate Arabs." People are shouting at me on the street. Like it's very, very. My brother got a text message. My brother is extremely unpolitical, or apolitical, not involved. He does child's performance, like an actor for kids. He's getting texts. "We should not sit with you or your brother," and he says, "Why are you addressing with me? Talk to my brother. I'm not a political figure." They told him, just like we don't like Yigal Amir and his brother. Yigal Amir is the person who assassinated Yitzhak Rabin. So the discourse is horrible. I'm not offended by it. I'm used to people heckling me. It saddens me. It saddens me that the people I serve with, the people that I live with, feel this bad, so bad. And I kind of want to give them a hug. So I'm saying this because I know that usually when you have these protests in Israel, I'm like, okay, you guys are in a temper tantrum. You're crazy. Now I think they're wrong, but I think that they're being sincere with their feelings. I don't know why they feel like that. Especially the really, really wrong arguments like, "Oh, you're going to cancel elections" and stuff like that. Someone is pushing this nonsense to them, but I would be more sensitive in this area than other protests that we've had in Israel.
All right, great. Thank you so much. Thank you very much. This was very helpful, at least to me. If anybody has any last quick questions, Victor, we have addressed these concerns earlier, so you could watch the recording. All right, till next time. Thank you so much. Thank you, everybody.
You all, bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you for this, Masha.
Mm.
Thanks, Ron.
Thank you. Masha, before you go, tell me if you're a happy camper.
Hold on, I'm gonna stop the recording.